basically after we had gotten it resolved, but now those people who were quiet or like didn't want to say anything are now speaking up, which I mean I have no issue with, but like why
Yeah,
didn't you speak up before? Like what were you doing?
exactly. I think too, it's just like with what we're about ready to talk about the topic, it kind of plays into that too. People are just bored.
Yeah, people are, and plus the topic is a fairly, I don't want to say it's sensitive, but it's fairly sensitive.
Yeah, some people really feeling it
So
more than others.
yeah, like because you don't know how it affects some people's families compared to others, and like we could make one remark where people are like, "Well, what you said is insensitive and doesn't make sense," but we don't have the same experience that other people might have, comparatively speaking, to this virus.
Exactly.
Um,
That's the thing too. You know, the people who have lost loved ones or seen loved ones go through it, then they're more sensitive to it.
yeah, like, yeah, they're definitely a lot more sensitive, and like, I will show sympathy for those people. Like, it is a hard time, but I mean, this is all going to be from our perspective, our point of view. So I feel like we need to make that a point when we like first talk about it too.
I
It's
agree.
like,
I think we should
well,
preface it.
this is like this is our experiences. This is from our personal opinion. Like other people might not experience the same thing or go through the same things, but this is kind of what we have seen, what we have noticed, and our input on it.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
All
because
right.
I
Well,
know people are gonna get heated if they hear some things we might say.
I'm sure, especially down the road, like, but I think if we preface it, and we also like, if we're gonna say something is factual, we'll find a way to put it up in the video, like our
Yeah,
link
like
or
if we add it to
whatever.
you, yeah, if we add it to YouTube, we could put it in description, like where we found that the
hmm
facts at.
So I think that'll
But
be useful for like future podcasts where the
yeah,
topics are more like you need some factual basis.
yeah, not just like I feel like for the most part, I feel like the majority of our podcasts are going, or the episodes that we do are going to be more like personal experience based rather
Yeah.
than like talking facts. Unless it's like the government comes out with some new law that they're passing, then obviously we'll have to look into that. But for the most part, I think what we talk about is just going to be like our own like experiences with everything that's going on.
Yeah.
But
So
I'm good to go
I'm good to
whenever
go.
you are.
I'm ready. All right, let's how do we want to
Who
start
wants
this?
to? Yeah, who wants to do the kickoff?
All right, hold on. Give me a sec. I want to see what I wrote out so I don't fuck it up. I could say welcome to the podcast, and then you could say we're your hosts, Volt, and then I come in with Poe. Or actually, no, we can just split like this. I'll say welcome to the podcast, then you'll say we're your hosts, Volt and Poe, and then I'll say you are now entering the deep.
Yeah, we could do something like that. I feel like I kind of want us to say our own name. So if you say something like, "Welcome to the podcast," I'm
Okay.
one of your hosts, Poe, and then I'll come in and say, and then I'm your other host, Volt, and then either one of us can say, "Welcome to the
Oh,
deep."
and yeah, and you can say you're welcome to the deep. Yeah. All right, bet. I like that. Let's do that.
Yeah, because then it gets both of us to hear both of our voices and get a name corresponding with the voices.
I like it. All right. Let's start this shit in
All
five,
right.
4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the podcast. We're your hosts. I'm Volt. Oh my gosh. I'm not Volt. I'm
You're
Poe.
not Bo. You're
All right,
Oh,
we'll try
bro.
this
I'm
again.
full.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Poe.
And I'm your host, Volt, and welcome to the deep.
All right,
All
so
right. So
today is going to be
today we
quarantine.
got an interesting topic, actually. I think this one's going to be, one that everyone can kind of get behind. Everyone's got their own experience with it. And before we get started, I just want to say this for everyone. This is our own personal experiences with it. Like, we're not saying anything that might trying to be offensive towards anyone who might have different experiences with everything that's going on during this time with the quarantine and like how it's impacted families. Like we want to say we do sympathize with those who have lost loved ones, but what we're going to talk about is kind of our own personal experiences with everything. So, Poe, if you want to go ahead and start, kind of what have you been up to during this whole quarantine time?
Well, with completing that last semester of college in the spring, I think the biggest adjustment for a lot of people in our age category is just going from being in school for half the semester, then coming out, trying to figure out online, and then for those graduating into a market where, I mean, Corona's coming and things are starting to close down. So honestly, for me, it's just been trying to find the job, and then every day I feel like there's just a new perspective on the coronavirus. We hear something new. It's either it's good news with the bad news. So honestly, it's just trying to hang out with friends, do what you can, even though now wearing a mask and grabbing one before you leave the house, it's just become commonplace. And having to deal with at the beginning there, I did not leave my house for a month. I was in quarantine when this whole thing started. I have Crohn's disease, so that makes my immune system weaker, and so I didn't leave the house for a month. And I don't know about you there, Volt. I mean, at the beginning, what was your kind of quarantine experience?
Well, so my quarantine experience started out a little bit different than most. So I was in spring break with the other group of our friends, down in Florida actually. So we were down there in the thick of things when everything started closing down. Some beaches were being closed down by police on horseback and all that. So like our first experience with it, like it was a little different because it was like right as things were starting to kick up, like early March when things were like starting to come over to America. So like I definitely have a perspective on it from like the fact of I was in the thick of things, like in a state that I didn't live in with everything being closed down. It was like really it's nothing that we've ever seen before. And it's crazy to think that like how much this is affecting not only ourselves but everyone else around the world because as much as even Trump has said it's the China virus, like it's now a US virus. Like this is something that we all have to band together to stop. And there are a lot of people that are out there that are reluctant to use face masks because they say it's difficult for them to breathe. And like I understand that for some people that might have like respiratory issues, like yeah, it can be a little bit more difficult, but in the long term of things, when you look at it, the countries that wear the masks, it's the issue is resolved quicker. But in America, I mean, we're just kind of stubborn in that way where we don't want to have to. People are saying like by us wearing the mask, like we're losing freedom and all that, like we're being forced to do this. But for me, like it's not difficult to wear the mask. Like you don't have to wear it very often. I mean, for the most part, we should be staying at home, just quarantining ourselves until this is over. I mean, if you have to go out and get groceries, wear a mask, or if you have to go out to do something, wear a mask. I mean, it's not really about protecting yourself, it's about protecting everyone else around you. Like the mask doesn't stop you from getting the virus, it stops you from spreading the virus. And I think that's the biggest thing is like we have to work together in all of this.
Yeah, and I think it's hard too because America's just that it's a special country in the sense that we have such a solidified view of our rights. We know what they are, and we have the Constitution, and we're all about, we don't want big government. That's America, part of its freedom and its charm. And now we're finding ourselves in a scenario whereas the typical American can't just do whatever he or she wants anymore. And we're actually having to think about certain choices that we want to make, whether it be going out to the bars or even hanging out with our friends, like if, you know, one person's really worried about it, or if, there's a chance that you could spread it to each other. It's just now Americans are having to think about their actions, I think, more than normal. And it's just messing with us because we're not accustomed to it. We're so
No,
used to
yeah.
rebelling against somebody telling us like you have to do something. As Americans, we just want to do the exact opposite.
Yeah, it's funny that you say rebellion against it because for a country that's so much on like having our own freedom and own independence, like we don't like big government. But then during this time, what's the one thing we're all relying on? The government. I mean, we had the
Exactly.
stimulus checks that came out, like there's supposed to be more that are coming out here soon. Like for a country that is as much as we claim independent or like separate from our government, we do rely on them quite a bit, and yet we still try and put down the government, which I can understand. Like, if you don't agree with some of the political views, like, that's a whole different topic. But for the most part, like, the government does provide a good amount of relief to assist us during this time. We just neglect that and go on and try and live our own lives like nothing's happening. And I feel like that's what a lot of people are doing by like choosing not to wear the mask right now.
Yeah.
It's like the government's trying, they gave us the stimulus to try and make sure like we could self quarantine for that time. Like that's why it was put out, was to try and get us, to stay at home and like only have those essential workers like out there. But people just don't want to do that. People want to like go hang with your friends. I think for our age group, which for those that don't really know, we're in the like middle 20s, so we're
Yeah.
fresh out of college, like we're fairly young kids, like we still like to, go have fun, party, go to bars, like enjoy our friends' companies and all that. So it was definitely difficult for us. I will say that, like that first month, like you said, you were self quarantining. I definitely just wanted to go down and hang out with you. But I knew
Yeah.
you have your Crohn's, which very scary for you during this time. Like definitely didn't want to see you get sick or ill or anything like that. And our friends, like we got to a point where we just kind of said, screw it. Like, you know what? We're at the age group. If we get it, our chances of dying from it are not nearly as high as other age groups. So we essentially said, what, screw it, let's hang out. But we also did it in the sense of we were only hanging out in our group. Like we weren't going to big public spaces, spreading it. And when we were, we still brought masks with us to try and protect others. Like some people might call it reckless, like what we did, but we were doing it in the most like safest way that we could while still being able to spend time with each other.
And I think too, communication is just key within your friend group and your family if you're going to be hanging out with them. I mean, like with us right now, we're dealing with Parker, our one of our friends. He was hanging out with some people and they were partying, and one of them, the people they were partying with, just said, hey, two of us tested positive for COVID, and Parker let the whole group chat know so that anybody of us who had interacted with them just kind of say, hey, we were actually exposed to this, like it's a possibility. He just got tested though, and he came back with a negative. And Mason
Yeah,
and Bolt
luckily.
here, you were sick a little bit.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it was because the symptoms I had were minor symptoms of COVID, but they're also symptoms for other things as well. And I still live with my parents, and my dad just got over a head cold, which those symptoms do correlate directly with them. I mean, the way I was feeling and described to him was the same way he was feeling, and he did not have COVID. So
So
I'm not sure what it was. I mean, it could have been a little bit of like stress induced because of this time. Like everyone is freaking out over it, like me especially. Like I definitely don't want to get COVID because my biggest fear is not really concerned about my own well-being. I'm more concerned about spreading it to my loved ones and getting them sick and potentially getting them 6 feet under. Like
yeah,
that's my biggest concern. So I'm definitely like it's been fairly recent since that issue happened, so I mean I'm gonna be self quarantining for the next 2 weeks just to make sure that it's all out of my system before I do anything else. So I mean there's precautions that we've been given that we can take, and like I'm taking them to the fullest because I'm definitely not trying to keep this thing going because I mean, you look at countries like Italy, like
oh
their cases were awful. They were horrible. They were worse than what we were, but now we're worse than them because they stayed quarantined, they stayed at home, they got through it. And as it went through, their cases went down. Our cases are actually just rising, and there's
yeah.
talks that there might be even a second wave coming of it. So,
Yeah, I mean, also I know our numbers are rising here too, because for whatever reason, we really struggled here in the US to get the tests going. I don't know what it was with the delay, but like us getting tests here in the United States, I mean, we basically gave the first tests out to places like New York and others who were having the real hot spots at first. And then in other places, other states, it took it a while to get the testing. And even just till now, finally, I heard that around here, you can get your test results in 20 minutes in some places. So that's definitely improving and is probably contributing to, some of those positives going up as we're finally getting testing. And two, I think the quarantine I mean, granted, it probably slowed the spread for COVID. I agree. But for people like me who spent a whole month in quarantine, I wasn't around, how you need other people's germs and interacting with them to help kind of boost your immune system. Things like the common cold when I was coming out of quarantine, I was honestly more worried about those because I hadn't been around all my friends and like they're just regular everyday cold and regular flu type germs. And I was kind of worried like, hey, I haven't been around that. Am I going to be more susceptible and maybe have lost some of my immune strength against that stuff? So
yeah.
I think if people went past a month of quarantine, we would have seen other cases of like other types of viruses and flus becoming prominent along with the COVID.
Yeah, I definitely it's a weird thing to think because in my mind the way I think about it is if we do just quarantine and like you know say what, let's stop all jobs. I mean, if you can work from home, you know what, work from home as you can. But for those jobs where you have to kind of go into the office, if the job relies on that, you know what, then I think we should just shut it down for the time being. That's one thought. But then when you think about that, like if we do that, I mean, we're stopping our normal lives. Like, what are people gonna do like when it all goes over and like we have to return back to our normal lives? Like, how are people gonna be able to adjust to that? Because, for some people, especially like younger kids, like I hate to even like think about it or imagine it. Like there are some kids like in school currently, like middle school or high school, where their family life might not be the best. So things like school are an escape from their home lives. And if we were to like completely shut everything down, and they might not have the greatest home life, like whether it be an abusive parent or like just like they might share their room with like siblings, multiple siblings, and it's just a really crowded space. So you never have your own like independent or freedom from that. Like it can be detrimental in those cases. But I think in the long term of things, if we were to just essentially shut everything down, just quarantine until this all bowled over, I mean, we could return back to our normal lives at a quicker pace. Like right now, it's almost looking like it might not be even until the beginning of 2021 when we can start returning to our normal lives before this all bowled over. And even then, there's talks that COVID is just going to be part of the flu cold season coming up. That's going to be cold flu COVID season.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, because when this whole thing started, I don't know if you remember, they were kind of hoping that the normal flu, when the summer rolled around and that heat came, it was going to kill off the coronavirus. And that never happened. And I mean, it's perfect kind of atmosphere is the winter months. So I mean, here in America and around the world, really, everybody needs to be getting ready for winter's coming, and this thing's just going to get nastier. So I'm hoping that the government is going to come up with some type of plan along with states who are listening to their local health officials to create like a state by state plan based off of how each state is dealing with the virus. Because there are states across the country are in different stages. No one state, I feel like, is probably in the same position as the other. So there's not really going to
yeah,
be one plan that fixes it all.
no, there really isn't. But the issue with that as well is you do have some people that might be considered essential workers that might live on the border between two states where they kind of flip back in between. Like, what do you do in those scenarios? Like, are you essentially like pulling the illness from one to the other? But I also think that like I think one of America's biggest issues with this whole virus as well too, and that we can't get over it, is we're such an unhealthy country
Yeah,
that
we
we
really
all
are.
have horrible immune system. Like obesity is super high. Like we don't have great, like we do have really good healthcare systems. We just don't utilize them as effectively as we can. I mean, we considered essential workers fast food places as essential workers. Like think about
Yeah.
our own health. Like no wonder it's still affecting us so much, because if we contract it like we contract other viruses, weaker immune systems, unhealthier people are definitely gonna, be affected by this. And for how unhealthy America is, it doesn't shock me that we're still going through the thick of things because of how unhealthy we are, how weak our immune systems are, and how reluctant we are to, make a change to our own bodies to try and combat everything. Like not only should we be wearing masks to try and protect others, but we also need to be looking after ourselves and our own health and well-being. And yet people still aren't doing that. Like I know it's hard to work out because gyms are closed and everything like that. But I mean, there are a lot of like workouts you could do at home, just like kind of burn calories, lose weight. I mean, vitamin C you could take to boost your immune system. I mean, there are a lot of options out there that I just feel like we don't utilize to their fullest potential.
I agree, and I think it's just the biggest thing too is people getting past the fact of I'm not worried about getting it and dying and remembering that they need to be worrying about others. And America is so narcissistic. We like to eat what we want, do what we want, when we want, how we want it, who we want it with. Like we want to control every aspect of our lives. And now
Yes,
that
we
we're in a
do.
position where our actions can affect somebody else, we don't know how to react. And we hate it because we never had to do it before. Not on
No,
our
and that,
terms.
yeah, and when you talk about that too, like it's different when you think about it, like because friends and family, like you have that relationship with them where you think that, but for the stranger, the bystander that you see or that you drive past in the car, like you don't even consider them, and I feel like that's super sad because as a country we do have a lot of patriotism that we use and we like try and band together as much as we can, yet we still segregate ourselves within the country, regardless of race either. We don't we don't value each other's lives if we're not friends or family really, and it's really sad, especially during these times because we're so focused on ourselves and not, the billions of other people in this world that we've never met before, but still we could affect.
Yeah. I think that just goes to show you how, in a sense, just the morals of the world have kind of gone down. And if we just don't care about the average Joe who's walking past us on the street, it's just weird. And I think it's good too. There's a lot of good that's going to come out of this whole pandemic. I don't think if this hadn't happened or some type of tragedy, now I am saying, anybody who has lost someone or has had to see a family member go through it, our condolences go out to you. It's horrible. But also, we do need to be, learning the life lessons like this, that caring about the everyday person is something we don't do on a normal basis. And I don't think we would have seen it or recognized it because it's on such a big scale now with this pandemic that it's impossible not to see the narcissism. It's just right
Yeah.
there up on our face.
Yeah, I mean, it's smacking us right in the face, and it is baffling because I will say I've had my own thoughts of where, like someone's mentioned that someone that they know have passed. I'm like sitting there like, well, how does that affect me?
Yeah.
Like I've definitely had those thoughts, and like I'm not saying I'm unlike everyone else, saying that there have been times where I have been narcissistic because we're all human. There have definitely been times where everyone in your life, whether it be you or someone that you know, might not seem like they're a narcissistic person, but they do have times where they are narcissistic and they only really think about themselves. And like I say for sure, I've had those times happen to me, but it definitely has opened my eyes a lot more during this time about the care and well-being of those that I don't know. Because while we have people who are, dying from this virus, we also have people who are still dying from, everything else that goes on, whether that be
Hmm.
murder or accidents or anything like that. But I think because it is on a, like you said, a more like wider scale of things, a broader scale, we're seeing it more up close that we really don't value the lives of others unless they are meaningful to us, whether that be friends, families, co-workers, anything that we have like constant contact with.
Yeah, it's hitting home in a way that we never expected it to. And
Yeah.
it's just I I think the biggest thing too is this uncertainty that just goes on top of realizing how terrible we treat each other, the threat of losing somebody, and then we just don't know when it's going to be over.
Yeah, we really don't. Like, I mean, they're like you mentioned it earlier, we were talking about like how college kids, like we are just now graduating, looking for jobs. Like, luckily I had a job that allowed me to be able to go work from home. So like I feel, kind of blessed to have the job I have. While it might not be like my favorite job in the entire world, I'm still able to like pull an income in, make payments on things that I would need to still make payments on and still be able to work from home. Not everyone has that ability, especially the kids who are just now graduating. Like with business closing down, job offers are no longer out there. It's harder to find jobs because they don't know when they're going to be open. Like with my job, like I was in the office, but then moved to work from home. Like there was talks, maybe we could go at the beginning of July back to work. Well, now it's talks like maybe October. So there is a lot of uncertainty, not only with like how it's going to affect our everyday lives after, but also our work lives. Like for those that might have lost a job or unable to find a job, like how how long is it going to take for those people to regain jobs after the quarantine, and especially those that were business owners who, because there's no business, they can't afford to keep it open. Like, what are we going to do for those people? Like, that's their livelihood at stake that no longer is there for them anymore. So there's a lot that I think we're not even focused on that is affecting for after the quarantine. Like, we're so focused on what's happening right now that we're not even looking at the big picture of after this all goes over.
Yeah, because I mean, with cases rising here and states talking about maybe instituting a quarantine again, thinking that masks won't even be enough for this, as you previously mentioned, the second wave that appears is to be predicted to come for America. I mean, the businesses, they just, for the most part, have finally gotten back to some sort of normalized schedule, the new normalized schedule, and they're open and they're making money again. They're able to bring back hopefully all or at least most of their employees. But it's just, can they handle everything closing down again in a event of a really bad second wave? Or will the government have to come up with a plan to kind of, I don't know, I don't want to say bail them out, but help them get through it so that they can survive? Because if we keep losing more and more businesses, I mean, I know Nike, they released 1,500 employees as of a week and a half ago, and they plan to start shrinking down different areas within the company that they viewed as really not necessary in the circumstances that we're all living in right now. And I think that's another thing that's going to be coming. The jobs at first, when this all started, for the college kids who were graduating and had them lined up for post graduation, that dried up and disappeared. Those were the first phase from the first wave of this whole thing. It's concerning to think that maybe if we have to quarantine again and in a second wave, will there be more examples of companies like Nike having to start making layoffs off people that they had had working with them for years or anytime pre-corona?
Yeah, and like not only to mention that, but when you think about our economy in a whole, the one thing that we do is import goods from other countries. Like, I'm sorry, you can't go to like a Walmart, Target, anything like that and pick up a store-bought thing that doesn't say, made in China, made in the Philippines, something like that. Like, if it gets so bad, if it gets worse, like if that second wave does come and it's even worse, because there was a report that came out like that the original strand of COVID had like mutated and became stronger. So if you had it originally, like you still could get this newer strand. Like if it does keep mutating and become stronger and stronger, there is definitely a chance that if the second wave does come, it could be worse. And like if we have to shut down again, like we don't manufacture a lot of goods here in America, and the goods that we do manufacture aren't nearly as good as the ones that we import in. So, I mean, to call ourselves one of the greatest countries in the world, because that's what Americans love to do, we're so reliant on other countries for things that if we do get quarantined again and businesses do shut down, like, what are we going to be able to do, in the long term of things? Like, say we'd have to almost quarantine indefinitely just to contain ourselves from not ever obtaining another pandemic type virus like this. Like,
Yeah.
what would we do in those situations?
I think the business landscape, I was kind of talking with my dad who works with bonding insurance projects and construction projects. I mean, he bonds the insurance for the construction projects. And retail right now, retail space taking huge hits with businesses closing or not being able to afford their rent. Retails like landowners, I mean, I would not want to be in their shoes right now. Like Simon Property Malls, like nationwide, I mean, they've got to be really, really concerned about how in the future they're going to be able to keep businesses paying their bills. And, if we do have to re-quarantine, or like the grocery store, you know how we have online grocery pickup or even the delivery option, and that's become
Yeah.
huge, huge during this whole
Oh,
pandemic.
that's big. Like, it's
I
been huge for everyone.
I truly think that Amazon, they kind of pioneered the whole idea of just doing straight delivery for groceries. I think with the pandemic and everything that we've seen with grocery stores, like when I go into the grocery store, people are not great about social distancing. I mean, it's cool to have masks and all, but if you're still being on top of each other, there's still a good chance that you could spread the virus. And I really think that if this keeps going the way it is and the second wave is bad, we're going to see grocery stores basically just become food distribution centers, and you just order your groceries online and they get dropped off at your door so that people aren't having to be on top of each other in the grocery stores spreading this thing.
Honestly, and I wouldn't even think that'd be a bad idea, even if we weren't in the pandemic right now.
Yeah.
Like, it's one, it's a little bit less foot traffic. It'll cause a lot less of a carbon footprint that we're leaving, because people have to drive to grocery stores. They're not walking or biking or anything like that. So if we do that, I mean, it would be less total cars that would be going back and forth. I mean, gas wouldn't really be required because no one's really like driving anywhere.
Besides the delivery drivers, yeah.
Yeah,
And
besides
even
those
then,
delivery drivers.
there's companies like Nikola and there's another one. There's another company similar to Tesla that just they got like 2 billion in funding, and they're the company that's going up against Nikola, whose name is it's gonna make me mad. I'll look it up here in a little bit. They made a deal with Amazon for by end of 2020 something like 10 to 20,000 electric mid-size delivery vans, and I
Yeah.
think that those type, I mean, with the grocery stores changing to just distribution, It'll be things like that. We'll be able to reduce, like you said, our carbon footprint by moving to electric delivery vans.
Yeah, it's not Nissan, is it?
No, it's not Nissan. It's
Okay.
I'll look it up right now, but
Yeah, no, that's what I was about to say. Like, even if we do, like, even if it's just a delivery, people like electric cars are still a thing. And I think it's like really interesting to look at like how far our technology has come. Because for me, like look at when the computer was first made. Like that was the biggest boom. We put so much time and effort into technology, like laptops, phones, and cars. Like we haven't really put it into medical or anything like that. They've all been for personal use that we use the majority of technology. While sure, medical still does get a lot of great inventions that like help our healthcare in total. I feel like most of our time and effort that we use for our big technology boom is put into phones and computers and video games and things like that that aren't necessarily beneficial in the long term of things for overall use, but are beneficial for personal use or anything like that.
yeah.
Because I mean, you see things where like if you talk to like any grandparent or anything like that, like I mean, there were talks that flying cars might be available. And like Family Guy has talked about like drones being like used for delivery instead of like actual people from Amazon. So like there are still a lot of things that I definitely think that we could, work towards trying to achieve during this time that could, improve the quarantine, whether it be, using the electric cars and having a food distribution from grocery stores, like you said, or having it be, delivery drones for packages, things along those lines that will stop us from having to go out and, we can really quarantine and do it
Exactly.
effectively. But
The
who
company was
knows?
Rivian. That's their name.
Rivian. Okay.
They just have a manufacturing site out in Arizona, and the plan is for Amazon to purchase, I was way off, 100,000 of their automotive startup all electric delivery trucks.
Is there a date when that is supposed to like kind of
Says
kick
it's
up?
geared toward supposed to help Amazon in their plan for their 2040 net zero carbon goal. So like by the end of 2022, Rivian expects to deliver 10,000 of them by the end of 2022 to Amazon. And then they said that all 100,000 of the electric delivery trucks will be serviceable by 2023. So really in the next 2 to 3 years, Amazon will have a massive, massive contribution to decreasing our carbon footprint and giving other companies like Target, Kroger, Publix, Meijer, all the grocery stores an example of like, hey, if we just move to all delivery, then here's an option that can help our environment. Because that's another thing we're seeing with the quarantine. The environments was really thankful because we weren't putting out nearly as many emissions as we would be between cruise
Oh, I
ships
know.
and planes and cars.
I mean, yeah, think about it. Think about how 2020 started. Like we had wildfires in what was it, Australia, right?
Yeah, in California.
Yeah. In California, like the end of 2019 was going over like we live in the Midwest and like this was one of the least amount of snow winters that I think we've ever seen. And it really brought up the debate about global warming. Well, people have started to notice that during this quarantine, because, we're not driving as much, flying as much, not a lot of boats, we're not putting as much of the pollution in the air. And it definitely is reducing that, the carbon footprint that we have left. Like, and I think that's one thing that the quarantine has been good for. I don't want to say the quarantine's been good because
Yeah.
there's a lot of things, but it
It's
definitely
had
has
some
shown
positives along
it
with the
has
negatives.
had some positives along with negatives, which is, that goes with everything in life. Like you can't have the good without the bad.
Yep.
There's trade-offs in everything that we do. Back in my econ class, I remember reading the book. You can't, what was it? Can't eat your lunch, and oh God, I can't remember the saying anymore.
Can't eat your
Um,
lunch.
I'll have to look it up. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but it was a saying. It was like you can't have something, and oh, you can't have your lunch and not buy it.
Oh,
So you
okay.
can't, yeah, you can't have something and it not have any cost or effect against you.
Yeah.
Like nothing's free in this world is another thing that you could say as well. And that comes with, improving our pollution, improving our carbon footprint that we're leaving on this world. Because I feel like you hit on it like earlier, saying that people are narcissistic. Like I hate to say it, but we don't really think about others, especially those that are following us. Like I personally want to leave a world that my kids could live in, grow up in, have like the same experiences, if not better than what I had. But the way that things keep trending, like if this quarantine didn't happen, like we could have like really screwed up the world with the pollution that we were causing that might have like taken away a lot of the opportunities that we had as kids that they might not.
Yeah, and this is gonna sound kind of childish and dumb, but I was watching The Lorax yesterday with my girlfriend, and I hadn't watched that movie in years. So the political message that was in there about global warming and the warnings about corporate companies cutting down too many of our trees and the effect of that, it hadn't really sunk in like how it did watching it now versus when I was a kid, seeing this pandemic and being older, going to college and actually looking at the corporate world. I mean, that the corporate America is just the consumerism of it all and how we just destroy all of our natural resources because we're trying to hit short-term goals without thinking about long-term consequences. And the
Yeah, and
Lorax kind of
that's
put that into perspective for me, and I was like, "Oh no, what are we doing?"
Yeah, that's why I was kind of talking about the technology aspect of it. Like, we do still use a lot of primitive technologies. Like, for me, I used to work for the city that I live in, and I worked in the park and recs. Like, one thing that we do is like we try and take care of the surrounding areas, whether it be like get rid of dead trees, replant new trees. But the machinery that we use and the trucks that we use to like go around cause so much pollution that there's gotta be an easier way or a more effective way for our environment than what they're using right now. But we don't put the time, the effort, the money into those things because we don't see that as a big time goal for
So
the
worried about
long
that
term of
bottom
things.
line.
Yeah, we're so worried about getting the job done and not worried about how we're getting the job done or what
Exactly.
the effects that it's doing to us. And for me, like I definitely feel like there were a lot of things that could have been done different. Like I definitely think that we could put a lot more time, effort into, I hate to say it, but into school. Like I feel like that comes back to a big root of problem is in America we're one of the worst in all of the world in every single subject that there is. But it's because we have a school system that's based off of regurgitating information and not actually learning the information.
Yeah.
And I feel like if we go for, people learning, giving people the freedom to expand and try out new things or like really have the ability to experience different opportunities that they might not have to because they're not forced to, take 4 years of math when they don't have any interest in math or they're not good at it, but they might be really good at English or science or anything like that, but we're forcing them to do things that aren't going to be beneficial for them. And I feel like if we take the time, like revamp that school system and really improve it, will be able to get people to, you know, pull out, the bright out of
Mm-hmm.
all this darkness that we're seeing right now. It's like there is a light at the end of the tunnel, but right now we just can't see it because we're just so far into this that we don't know where to go. But I think it starts with the young. Like we have to revamp everything from the bottom and build it back up.
You bring up a good point too, because the school system is kind of like a one size fits all hat. You just expect to have one set of rules and one kind of guideline and expect everybody to fit into that guideline and it'll work for everybody. And if you really think about it, our school system, just like kind of how we've handled this pandemic, we've wanted to just slap one big old patch on it and say, yep, that's the process. That's how it's going to be for everybody. This is, the one way to do it. And it doesn't work that way. Everybody's
Does not
different.
work.
Every situation's different. And I agree. I think the light too could also all the knowledge that we could bring in out of people who may have been considered dumb because they weren't the best at English, but they're super good at math. They may not be a great writer, but they're amazing with math and calculus. And if they could
Yeah.
just in our education system focus on what they're motivated about, what they enjoy, then we'd have people coming in out of the school system and into the business world or the medical field or whatever it may be who are passionate about what they want to do and they know and they're not getting to college out of high school and they're like, oh, gee, I need to pick a degree.
Or
And
you pick a degree and like I figure out I don't like that.
yeah,
Like that, and that's the thing too, is like for me, I definitely think that you can't really say anything bad about preschool or kindergarten, really, or really about first grade. I think up until you hit about sixth grade, it should kind of just be like regurgitating information. You're kind of teaching them basics. Once you hit that seventh, eighth grade, that's considered middle school, really. That's at the point of when, your ability to learn information, actually obtain that information, is really starting to increase because of our psychological development. And once we do hit that, one, we're able to go ahead and start actually learning the information, having the charismatic feelings towards other, which that's when, for me personally, when my personality really came out was during that time. So that's when I figured out, things I was interested in. But then once you hit high school, we don't have a say. And you're supposed to, go 4 years without having a say of what you're doing, what you're learning, not knowing, not having the ability to, try different things, do different things, because you have to follow this path that's been put in front of you. And I mean, there's I'm not even remembering the name of the poem, but there's the poem that talks about you have the two paths and the one less traveled.
oh, the path
The path,
least traveled.
yeah,
Is that
we
the
don't.
is that a biblical one or is that
I don't think so.
or is it
All
just
I
like one of
remember,
those businessy type proverbs where it's like,
I
the
think it's
people
a
who are successful take the path least traveled or whatever.
I'm not really sure. I want to say it's the business one, but don't really quote me on that. All I remember is in seventh and eighth grade, we had to memorize that and basically regurgitate that back to our teacher at the time. And like that has always sat with me because like that is the essence of what school is I don't even remember what the poem was really talking about. All I remember is that I had to memorize it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and you think about that's all school is, and then when you go into high school, it's just the same thing over for 4 years, and then all of a sudden you're supposed to suddenly know what you want to do for the rest of your life, go into college, study for that, but you never had the ability to try out different things. Like
Yeah.
some schools don't have like a computer science program or anything like that, so you might not have the ability to, see if that's something you want to do or not. Or some kids just might be like, I don't really know what I want to do, and they just do a general studies. But then once you graduate with general studies, what are you doing with that degree? Like, you're
Yeah.
kind of well rounded, but there are jobs looking for specific skill sets that you don't have if you're not going for that certain degree. So for me, I feel like if the school system kind of revamps to let college is now, where you're kind of like picking your major, looking into it, and being able to switch, if that becomes high school, where you're given the ability to like have that freedom in high school to figure out what you want to do in the world, and then when you hit college, you go deeper into that specific topic that you have spent the last 4 years figuring out what you want to do, spend 4 more years getting a lot more interest in it. I mean, you could spend, probably you don't need all 4 years to at that point then go into it. They could figure out a way to do like in more internships or job shadows or things along those lines that will actually help kids find jobs, because kids that come out of college typically spend about 6 months to a year before they actually find a job that's not a part-time or a temporary job. They find a full-time job.
Yeah. And I mean, I think too, if our school system was the way that you and I were kind of talking about, I feel like as human beings and as people, we'd mature faster and we just come out with different skills that usually we don't learn till later through the hard way, and we'd be better suited and better equipped as just people to handle pandemics or other hard-hitting things that come like what we're seeing right now. And I think the quote you were talking about, correct me if I'm wrong, was by Robert Frost.
Yeah.
Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference.
Yep. I mean that hits it dead on. You take a different path than what everyone else is, because not everyone else is going to experience the same thing. Like, we don't grow up in the same house with the same people around us. We all have different environments and everything. And yet with this quarantine, I mean, you said it, we're just throwing a patch on it. Like, we're not going for each person's, situation and how it's one affecting them, but it also, we don't really notice it either, because we're so accustomed to it with our school system that we spend, I mean, for us right now, we've spent half our life, if not more, in schools, in a system where this is the one path that we have to follow because we've been told that our entire lives. And
And we're
yet
just
all of a sudden
handed
now we're
textbooks
supposed
of
to,
information and memorize them. That's all we're supposed to
yeah,
do. It's not,
that's
there's
all we
no
do.
creation of enjoyment of learning. Like, you should, they don't encourage you to become passionate. It's just, no, here are the facts. This is how you do it. Now memorize this and come back on a certain date where we're going to have a test, and then I'll determine if you move on or not.
We memorize it for a test. We learn this, like, if I could go through and like try and remember, like, for me, I can't even deny it, I was a nerd growing up, so like there was a lot of things from school that I do remember, just because like I personally enjoyed school growing up. It really wasn't until college where I started to have that different outlook on school, that made me really like not like the system. Like, up until then, I was fine with the system. I was like, this is good. It's teaching us some things, we might not have learned unless we went to school, but it also isn't allowing us to use our creativity in the world. Like, for me, I'd rather have a whole team that might specialize in different aspects than a whole bunch of people that are well-rounded in everything, but no one's really, that number one.
Yeah.
So, like, you can use that in the sports terminology in baseball. It's like having a whole bunch of like middle of the rotation pitchers instead of having your ace or anything like that. Like, when you think about it, that's what we're doing with all the kids that go through school, is we're just making them like average. We're not allowing them to reach their full potential by, choosing the different things. And we're doing the same thing with this quarantine, by we're not allowing people to, get past it at a quicker rate than others, because there are some people that, if we give a little bit more help towards them, it might full on push us out of this quicker than with others. Because, I mean, you look at New York. New York is
Ugh.
horrible with it right now. We should really be focusing on the bigger cities and trying to help them out, whether it be doing it just a stimulus for the people that live in those bigger cities instead of a stimulus for everyone. Because I got the stimulus, but one, I work from home. I didn't need it. I mean, I won't deny it by any means. Like, free money is free money. You can't say no to it. So I can't really deny it by any means. But there are definitely people that I don't think needed it to get through this time. And yet we just sent it out there.
Yeah. And I think that kind of just goes with typical America. They just think if we throw enough money at it, the problem will just solve itself. And that's the
Yeah.
same. It's like slapping a band-aid on it. It's just not going to work.
That's our solution for everything, though,
I
if
mean,
you
it's
really
but
look
we've been
at it.
taught it in our school system, like you're bringing up, like all of the consequences that we as a society here in the United States, at least, are dealing with in regards to this pandemic and how people are handling it are all because of how we were groomed by our school system and how just everyday life functions and became normalized.
It's a system. We're no longer individuals or people. We are a part of a system.
We're
And that
social security
system,
numbers.
yeah, seriously, we're given numbers within months of us being born. Like, we're not people. We're not seen as individuals to the government. We're seen as numbers. And like, it's really sad because then you look through schools and this pandemic, and it's just numbers that you see. You look at statistics, and it's just numbers. And sure, the numbers give you a good insight of what's happening, but it doesn't give you the picture of what's happening. It just gives you information, which the information can be useful, but if you're not seeing the actual effects, then you don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
And that's our entire government, really. It's just, one band-aid after another, trying to hopefully stop the bleeding that we caused back in the day. Like, I mean, really, when you think about it, it all started with the Great Depression. Like, when that kicked in, like, what was the one thing we did? Slap a band-aid on it.
Yeah.
Like,
I
that's
think
been our thing for years.
yeah, with the to go along with the numbers thing. Numbers are easy to ignore. People's names, faces, that's a lot harder to ignore. I think too, if locally, I don't know, if with like privacy, obviously you'd have to give families the options to not have their loved one's name included for whatever reason. But if instead of stating, like, here are the numbers of people that died, or the numbers of people that are infected in a certain area, maybe putting the names of those people along with numbers, giving a name to the number would help for those who are kind of skeptical and don't think this is real or are saying, hey, I'm young, I'm healthy, I'll be fine, everybody else, that's their problem. It would make them kind of have to think, wow, look at those names, those numbers, those aren't just numbers. I can't just look away from those. Those are actually people like me or, my mom.
And we've done that before with 9/11.
Yeah.
You
And
go there, and those names are etched into that stone, and it really makes you think about the people that were lost, instead of just saying, oh, couple hundred people died or a couple thousand people died. It makes you think, wow, this person really died because of this. But
it's
we're
kind of,
not doing anything for this, which we have never seen anything like this in our entire lives.
yeah.
Like, you think about it, when we get older, this is probably going to be something that's taught in the history classes at what's happened, and yet we're not treating it as such.
Yeah. I mean, these will go down as the Corona years or the COVID years or something. And I mean,
Yeah.
any American, young and old, if you can talk and, probably by the time you hit fifth or sixth grade and someone says 9/11, you know exactly what they're talking about. And you may not know the severity of it, but you at least know by that age that it was something bad that happened and a lot of people died. You don't just think about the numbers, you think about the family members who were lost. And I think if we can get that with this coronavirus, it will greatly help us accept quarantine or just work together to get this under control.
It really will, because if you go through schools, like, I mean, I have cousins that are just now graduating from high school, so they're all born in like 2002. So they weren't alive during 9/11. Yet I have two twins that are cousins that were co-valedictorians, and they gave a speech that, I mean, even talked about 9/11 being in it and how they weren't alive, but they know so much about it because school taught them. And like, for I don't know about you in school, like we went to different schools, so I'm not sure if you guys experienced the same thing, but like when we were learning about it, we heard actual voice like calls between people, and like they were saying that I don't think I'm gonna make it, I love you, like
Yeah.
things like that. Like I definitely, like, ever since then, it's I've never been the same after like experiencing that, because one, I didn't know those people, but that just sat with me so much that it's like, I mean, that could have been a family member of mine, it could have been me, like there I could be in that same situation. And I feel like whenever we have historical moments like that, such as this COVID, we need to make it personal, because if we call ourselves one of the greatest nations, and we try to band together, then we need to, band together and say, you know what, this virus is attacking us as a country. It's not attacking the hundreds of people, it's attacking us. It's
Yeah.
attacking us as a person. And yet we're not seeing it like that. We're like, oh, this age range is the one that, gets affected by it. I'm in a different age range.
It's
It
more
doesn't hurt me.
numbers. It's just more
It's
numbers.
numbers.
Yeah.
It's numbers, and that's what we see, and we're so, and the numbers desensitize us to it. It's because all we see is numbers. We don't have names, faces, personalities that go with
Mhm.
those numbers that really give us a reason to connect with them. But if we were given those, then it would just sit with us in a different way.
And as I'm sitting here thinking about it, I mean, I'm guilty of it too. I mean, honestly, probably up until just a few days ago, every few days I'll ask my dad, what are the numbers today?
Yeah.
I mean, that just
I mean,
sounds bad when you sit
it,
down, you
it
sit
does.
back and you think about it. I just said, what are the numbers today?
But the thing is we were never exposed to having to think like that.
Huh?
We were never taught to think like that. We were just taught to think,
Not till
you
after
know,
the fact, like 9/11. The names came
this is
after the fact.
we don't have any precautionary things set into place, and I feel like that's one issue that the government, like, I feel like they've done some good things during this quarantine and trying to help us out. Like the stimulus check was good. Uh, while I don't think it was like the smartest move to make, especially right then, I think it was good. It was beneficial for a lot of people, especially those who kind of lost out on jobs, who really needed the money, that might be living paycheck to paycheck or anything like that. Like, it was good. But when you think about it, like, people were just like, oh, it's numbers, it's money that I'm getting, but they're not thinking about, like, you know, anything else that's happening to an actual person.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's really sad to think about it, because I've been there too, where, I don't live, like, you guys are my best friends. You guys all live like 2 hours away from me. And I've been in that same spot where I've been like, I'm in the age range where if I get it, chances of me dying from it are fairly low. So you know what, screw it, I'll go.
Same.
I'll go down to see you guys. So it's like, I've been there too, but also I try not to be as narcissistic or all that with it, and I try to think about the well-being of others. And when you really like sit down and think about it, that's when it hits you. But for the fact is most people aren't using this time to, sit down and think about everything that's going on, or how it's affecting them or others or anything like that. They're just really kind of like, well, I don't have to work, I can sleep in, watch TikToks, do anything like that. So, I
Yeah.
mean, it's sad, because we're not treating it as a personal attack. We're just treating it as an attack against numbers. And we've been so desensitized to numbers that once we see a number, we don't think anything more of it. We're like, oh, that's it.
We're such an after the fact type of country. I mean, in everything we do, we practically let it get to the very brink there, and then at the last second, we all pull together and grab that oh shit handle and hold on for dear life and hope that this next plan that we all just whipped up is going to work. And I think we're finding that we finally found something that it's going to take a lot more than banding together. I mean, it's going to take every person in the country in order for it to work.
Every person, whether you get along with them. I know with everything that's going on right now with, police and Black Lives Matter and everything like that, we do have issues outside the pandemic that are going on. And it's sad. It's sad because for me, like, I can't even say I don't see color or see race, because by saying that, you see it. But for me, it's like every person has my respect. You have my right as a human decency until you abuse or use or overuse it.
Yeah.
So for me, every person is a person. They're not, they're not a color to me. Like, I notice their color, obviously, because it's a part of who they are, but I don't use that to judge them. I judge a person based off of their personality, based off of my interactions I have with them. But some people are not like that. Like, there are a lot of people that are not like that. And I think with everything that's going on, it is really hard for us as a country to really band together with everyone because of those type of people that are not okay with certain races.
Yeah. And I think, as Morgan Freeman said in an interview, he said, I'm going to ask that you stop calling me, because they're talking about the topic of racism. And the interviewer, who was white, an older white gentleman, asked me, says, do you believe racism is still one of the biggest problems facing America? And he said no. And this is what he said afterwards. He said no because, in his opinion, he views it as being easily solved. And he asked the person who was running the interview, he says, I'm going to ask that you stop calling me a black man. He says, and I'm going to stop calling you a white man. Because if you think about it, when we're going through school too, we're taught, that person is black, or that person is Asian, or that person is white. That, we put labels on everything, kind of like numbers, but with words. And we kind of stray away from the whole, as Dr. Seuss said, a person is a person no matter how small. And, small, big, tall, we're all people. We all started from the same place. And we're all going to end up in the same place, whether we like it or not. So I think
6 feet under.
We got to stop labeling people and think about, as you were saying, people as just people, another human being.
As much as I hate to say it, I do watch TikTok. I did see a TikTok video of this guy was getting interviewed, and they were African Americans or blacks, whatever you want to refer to them as. And the first thing he was asked, or the first thing he said he wasn't African American. And like, for me, like, growing up, that's how we were taught to, like, kind of look at them.
And label them. Yeah.
And really label them. Like, for us, we're considered white. We're white people, African Americans. But his response really blew me away. He said, no, I'm not African American. I'm an American. And everyone around him laughed. And I was like, well, that's true. And then he went on to say, I've never been to Africa. I'm not an African American. My ancestors might have come from Africa, but I personally have never been to Africa. So I am not an African American. I am just an American. And I feel like that is the best response that anyone could have ever had for it, because
I agree.
He's an American. Stop using race to label.
Yeah.
He is just an American, like you and me. We're just an American. Anyone who was born in this country that we call the greatest country in the world, they are American, regardless of the color of their skin. And yet people still neglect to see it that way.
It's sad. And we're seeing it, with the Black Lives Matter movement and all the protests, along with, unfortunately, the riots that have come out of it too. But we're seeing it with the pandemic and how people are handling it. That we don't see one another as people. We see each other as numbers or colors. And it's sad to say, But our school system really does teach it that way, though. If you really think about it,
It
they
does.
push the number. They push us to see people as just numbers and colors. That's horrible.
Yeah, dude, we've talked about this before outside the podcast. I really don't like the school system. I think it is one of the biggest crippling things in America.
And we're
There's so
seeing it.
many, yeah, there's so many things because as much as people don't want to, like, I've had this conversation with other people as well, like my own parents or my cousins or anything like that. And as much as you don't want to see it or don't notice it, once you like talk about it, you see it. Like when I mentioned that the school system kind of cripples us and like really is the effect of everything we do, they're like, how do you say that? And it's like, what do you spend the first half of your life doing? Going to school. You like everyone goes to school, whether that be up until senior year of high school or college. If you go to college, everyone goes to school and everyone is taught in the same system.
Mm-hmm.
So
We're
and
funneled
we've
into something we
and
never
yeah,
chose.
yeah, we had no choice of it. We really couldn't choose. I mean, really the only choices that are made are once we hit college. But
Yeah.
even then, the choices that we make aren't really,
Our
you
own.
know, what we want to do. We're kind of pushed into it by family, by friends, because it's like you might be interested in one topic that you might not be the greatest at, and you might be, pushed away by parents saying, "Oh, you won't ever be able to get a job with that," or anything like that. Like, I feel it's sad too because we don't get the ability to, try before college, before we get thousands of dollars in debt.
Yep.
And for me, I've been saying it for the past couple months. I definitely feel like if the school system was revamped to where, people are given that ability to, figure out what they want to do in their lives at an earlier stage, it will allow us to express our individuality more than what we are. Because, like, right now we have I'm spacing on the acronym, but the LGBTQ,
LGBTQ plus. It's
yeah,
now plus, I'm pretty sure. They added the
plus, yeah.
plus in the last year or something.
Yeah, so you have that are all coming out, which we live in a society that before that started to come out, I mean, you were seen as an outsider, a reject
You were
for
afraid of
that.
getting beat up if somebody in your neighborhood found out.
You were terrified of even telling your family.
Yeah.
And
Still,
it's
some people are
sad.
terrified.
It's sad because that's the way our school, because a lot of schools are based around religious aspects too, which the Bible, I mean, kind of talks about how being not man woman is bad, and that is kind of the basics. Even public schools, and they are be private public schools. Most people in America are Catholic or Christian, and they have those beliefs. So those beliefs are kind of pushed on to the students.
Yeah.
So they're in a situation where they might not feel comfortable doing it. But if we were in a school system where we're allowed to express our individuality, it would really, one, I think, have a healthier population for the country. It would allow people to, be themselves and not have to
Be
conform
happier.
to society. Yeah, and be happier in total. Like, depression is a serious thing. And I feel like with school, no one ever wants to just be a part of a system. No one ever
Mm-mm.
just wants to be a piece that's plugged in.
They want to be
They
their
want to
own
be their
system.
own person. Yeah,
Yeah.
they want to be their own person. And if they work in a group, in a collective group together as their own individual person, that's when you see people shine the most. But we never give people the ability to do it.
No, we suck that early on. Once we start the school process, slowly but surely, that individuality and that creativity just gets
It's
leached
thrown
out
out the
of you.
window.
I mean, when I was growing up, so there's a stretch there. It's a little embarrassing, but I'll admit it. Or I was homeschooled because I was sick. I got really sick. We didn't know, really what it was. It was turned out to be Crohn's, and I just couldn't do school. I was gonna miss too much time. I was in and out of the hospital, doctor's offices, surgeries, dealing with all that. And and I was still in kind of those early formative years where my creativity and my individuality was kind of allowed to thrive in a sense. Because yeah, I had the core curriculum that I had to do, of course, but also my parents are really good about exposing me to not just sports or not just art, but like I had to take one musical instrument at least all the way up till 8th grade. So I played guitar and piano. I also was encouraged to read as well as seek out sports and have those experiences. But in school, like when the public school system and private school, yeah, sports are there. Yeah, there's art class, and yeah, you have to read for school. But there's clubs, but it's not encouraged. Like they just kind of tell you, "Oh, this is here if you want," and it's going to be extra time that you have to spend away from your family instead of having this way our education is structured to encourage you to explore those different areas.
Yeah,
And
and
in medieval
I
times
mean,
too, they had apprenticeship. We've moved so far away from apprenticeship where you could explore and study under somebody and spend time figuring out by apprenticing with different people what you wanted to specialize
yeah, and then you mentioned the extracurricular activities. Like the biggest selling point on those that I feel is super sad is they just look good on your college applications or on like resumes or anything like that. Like they're not really there for, allowing you to thrive in an area that you're interested in. They're just there to make you look good type thing. And like how you said, like for homeschooling, like I wasn't homeschooled. I actually went to private schools for the majority of my life up until 6th grade. Um, and it is kind of a personal thing for me for school. School's always been like a big thing for me. But growing up, I was severely bullied and I was like beaten up. I was punched, kicked, verbally abused by a lot of my classmates. So I never really had the ability because of that to, express how I wanted to be. Like there was a time where I didn't speak at all really for a long duration of time that I had a speech impediment because I would go so long without talking that I couldn't pronounce certain words or I was too afraid to speak up. And it wasn't really until I switched schools where I got that freedom and I met a few of my other friends like Cam, like in our friend, where I was able to, really figure out who I was as a person.
in.
But
Yeah.
I don't think it was because of school that it did that. It was really more of the environment that I was in
Hmm.
that allowed me to do that. But for kids who are in the same schools with the same people constantly, like you don't have a change of environment that allows you to have that experience. You're stuck in place
Yep.
in a situation that you might not even want to be in, but
You're
you
stuck in
don't
a
have a
bubble.
choice over it. You don't have a choice over it. And like you just said bubble. Like what are we doing right now with the quarantine? Like we don't have a choice over it. And it sucks, but in the long term of things, it works to get us back into our normal lives and allowing us to become our individuals. Like people right now are so scared of having that individuality ripped away from them that if they were just to, I hate to say it, but comply
Yeah.
with what's going on, then they can regain that individuality after the quarantine.
And then that's where you have the people coming in and says, how big will we let the government get and will it shrink back down? And that's a fear. That's a risk reward that we've got to find the balance somehow as a people.
We do. And for me, I've never been one into politics. I mean, recently I have been, jokingly saying, but like I've really been considering it. Like when I turn 35, definitely consider running for president because for me, I mean, the presidency's been either people who have had political experience in the past, whether it be a senator or a governor of a state, Or in the most recent with Trump being a businessman, like you can see him running for president as being a way to increase his own business prowess
Hmm.
instead of, for the people. And I feel like if we had someone who was just a normal person for the people, it would be beneficial because I think right now, really, when you look at the government, it's the government versus the people. It's never really the government for the people or the people for the government. It's we're always against each other, and
Yeah.
we really just need to get to a part in society where we're cohesive together instead of always having backlash against each other. Like, sure, you might not get along or agree with everything that takes place, but I mean, that's life. Not everyone gets along, not everything goes your way.
Not everything's
And
the same.
people use that against each other. And
Yeah.
I feel like that's what really divides us is we are a really opinionated country as well too, and that's fantastic. Those opinions are what allow us to, experience new things in life or have new experiences that might want to improve us or give us a different outlook on
Bring
things
us
that
new inventions.
new inventions definitely, but we use it to put people down instead of having civilized debates or civilized conversations to have those experiences. We just say, oh, you don't think that, you're wrong then.
Yeah, we really do. And again, it all cycles back around to how we've been just trained and brought up to so focus on ourselves and just regurgitate. I mean, it's just one big
It's a
circle.
circle.
Yeah.
It's a one big loop. And I know we've had this conversation before about, us possibly living in the Matrix and stuff like that too.
And
Where I
that'll be
mean,
another podcast, I'm sure, down the
oh,
road. Those are whole
100%.
different conversations.
That's a whole different conversation, but I definitely think it kind of ties into like
Yeah.
the being in a big circle. Um, but yeah, I definitely think that with this whole quarantine that is going on, that we do need to make it more personal. Like that, I think that's the first step we need to do. Instead of it just being numbers, instead of it just being, so many cases, put a face, put a name, put anything to it. That way people can start to realize, it's not just a phony number that the government made up. Because I know I've talked to people who would be like, the government just made those numbers up. Not many people
Mhm.
haven't actually died. Like if we actually saw a name, a face, a voice to the name or face or anything like that, it would help us to really understand that this is affecting us and that we need to take the steps, whether it be the steps the government have given or whether it be steps that come out later. Like who knows what's going to happen in the upcoming months. No
Yeah.
one really knows if there's going to be another wave that comes through, another stimulus check, or any type of government law that's passed. Like we just had the CARES Act that was passed for like 401ks, 403bs, and all that,
Yep.
and that's allowing people to like withdraw money without the early withdrawal penalty and things along those lines. So that's definitely helped people out, being able to touch a portion of their money that they might not have been able to pay for bills and things along those lines. But while those have been good, we just see it as steps instead of like what we can do together.
Yeah. And
Like
I think
what can
it's
we do together?
Yeah, I think it's interesting how we had this whole idea of how, this first episode would be about quarantine. And quarantine kind of covers a lot. But it's interesting how through this whole conversation, we started off with quarantine and how just one topic has led us to identify so many different areas within our society that are contributing to the problem that we've now come to recognize through quarantine life and the coronavirus coming to America and to the world. I
Yeah,
think,
it's really brought out a lot of things that were hidden to us before, at least in my eyes. Like other people might not agree with me, and you might have your own different opinions. Like I know you and I are pretty similar on how we think and how we look at things. So when I think something and I say to you, you're like, wow, that makes sense, or vice versa.
Exactly.
But I definitely think that with this quarantine, it really has, shined a light on some things that we were, either one, reluctant to want to look at, or two,
Mhm.
we just never really thought about looking at it that way.
It's given us a fresh perspective, a new set of glasses to see things differently.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy because, I mean, you have all the Americans in the world that have those like rose-colored glasses. They want to see America as the greatest thing, but we do still have a lot of things that we need to improve upon in society. And that's one thing that I definitely feel like the quarantine has shined on, is the things that we can make improvement to, that will allow us to not only flourish potentially, because with how things are going now, right now, we're so much in debt, and we've been doing this for years and nothing's changed.
We
Like,
just keep spending money
change,
we don't have.
we need to, like,
We have
we've
no
been doing
control,
the same
self-control,
thing.
honestly. As America,
We
our government,
don't,
just like our people, we have no self-control, no
we really do
self-discipline.
not. When
And
we
it
want
is
something, we get it.
like I mean, as you know, the Bible says, you will reap the fruits that you sow. And in America, I think right now we are really feeling that saying. We are reaping what we sowed in just our lack of self-discipline, which goes back to,
Yeah,
how we're unhealthy, our education system is piss poor. I mean, and how we just treat each other on a day-to-day basis. Like we're talking about, it's just one big
it's
circle.
one bit. It all connects together, and yet people neglect to see that everything connects together, because they look at it as different aspects of life. But the thing that they don't realize is, while they are different aspects of life, they're all part of life.
Yeah,
And and we can't have one without the other. And while we keep doing this, like, really it just comes down to, taking off those rose-colored glasses and seeing America as this perfect country. Because don't get me wrong, I live here. I love America. I mean, it's my home country, but we do have issues. Every country has its issues, and
we
we've
may
been
be
doing the
better off than
same
most, but
thing.
yeah, we have our
Yeah,
problems.
we're better off than most for sure, but we still have our own issues, whether it be inside the country or how the country is actually set up or anything along those lines. We do still have those issues that we need to work out, but we've been doing the same thing for years with no changes. And I definitely feel like change needs to be coming to allow us to flourish in different aspects of society or the economy that we weren't before.
I
And
agree.
I think for me, it starts with our school system.
I agree.
And it starts at the younger ages, like starting people young and allowing them to develop themselves while having the backing of school and the economy and everyone else around them to flourish in those spots. But we don't do that. We just plug and play, basically.
And you know me, Volt. I like a good old confession, a good old-fashioned conspiracy theory.
I know you do. I know you
And
do.
you know how there's people who talk out about there about the third eye, and that younger kids and children are more susceptible to see things that we don't. Whether you want to call it creativity, individuality, the third eye, could it be that, kids, they can see things. When you're a kid, you're so brutally honest in those young ages. You call things like you see it. You don't beat around the bush. You don't sugarcoat it. You don't see things or express things through those rose-colored glasses yet. You just say what pops into your head, and you say it. It may be a little hurtful because it's true, but you're brutally honest. And and honestly, I think it makes us better people when you're just brutally honest. I mean, sure, there's times where maybe it's not always the best to say the
Depends on the
hard
situation.
thing. Yeah,
Yeah, it depends on yeah, this for me, especially our first time meeting, which that I feel like that's definitely going to be a different podcast in itself. Our first time meeting each other. Um,
100%.
yeah, but definitely me, a brutally honest person, always have been that way and never want to change it. I feel like it's better, to get that out of the way. But like how you said with kids, like kids see it, they see it as it is. Like
Mhm.
it is. But the issue with that is parents, other adults say, "Oh, you're just being naive." So
Hmm.
we're like,
We
we're
suck it out.
taught, yeah, we're taught that, seeing it this way, oh, we're not smart. We're naive. We're not seeing it the way it actually is, according to them, because we're not adults. We're not smart. We're just little dumb kids to them. Um,
Exactly. And they think because, they've been around longer and they've seen more that they're the ones that have all the answers.
which is so, so false.
Yeah.
So
Oh yeah.
false. Not even funny, dude. I'm not even gonna lie. Like, I won't say our generation's perfect by any means,
Oh no.
but like for those generations, like what was it, the Gen X?
Yeah. Gen
Yeah,
X, Gen
Gen X.
Z.
Yeah, and then millennials come after that. Like everyone's sitting there like millennials are like the worst ones, but I don't really think there's a worse generation. Like we all have our own issues within our generation. There's no reason for us to fight against each other.
I mean, as a creature, as a being, we started out naked and afraid, and one generation after another, we've just slightly improved on one another.
But the issue now with the recent things is the generations are trying to put other generations down. And I feel
It's
like
back to labeling. We're trying to label everything.
dude, it is one big label. I feel like if each generation just says, you know what, this is what we did during our time, what can you do?
Hmm. How can
It
you
just
build on that?
build on it, improve it, do whatever you can because each generation is going to have a different outlook, a different perspective of, things in society, whether that be the way we handle technology or school or anything like that, or work or job, like anything and everything is going to be seen differently from each and every person. But each generation before ours, I feel like definitely is saying, you know what, this is the way we did it. This is the way you need to do it. Because like, I've even seen tweets out there from people saying all those kids complaining about student loans. You can go through college without having to get student loans. I did it. I worked full time. But like, yeah, my parents did too. They worked full time at McDonald's on minimum wage and were able to pay college off. But if you did that now, you'd still be in debt.
Oh, you'd be in so much debt. Even if you go
So
to a
much
local
debt.
state school. I mean, as a college education, the cost too. For a lot of
Because,
people, they don't get the opportunity for higher education because it's been allowed to just reach this exorbitant amount that's ridiculous.
yeah, it's insane to think that generations before us keep wanting to say, we were able to do it. Well, things have changed. But
Hmm.
people don't want to notice that, things have actually changed in society. They just want to see it the way that it went down when they were living as a flourishing part of the economy instead of I hate to say the decline of their prime, but really
Hmm.
it's the decline of their prime. Like they're at the end. Like you got the baby boomers, the Gen X, Gen Y, millennials, Gen Z now, all
It's
those.
the
Like,
decline of their era, and they can't handle the rise of the new era.
yeah, and that goes back to narcissistic.
Yeah,
Like
and
that's all our country is. It's like, they still want it to be their time,
they can't
but
let it go.
and they're not ready to let it go yet. So it's sad because I definitely feel like as a country we really can work together well. We just haven't done it so far.
I think quarantine and coronavirus, if we really come together as a country and as a world, we'll be able to look at things in a blunt way like a little kid would. We kind of, in a way, get our little kid glasses back and we see the mistakes that we're making that contributed to how we reacted to this pandemic. And I truly think that we can come through the tragedy and through the chaos of it all and see how we can be better and do better than we've done in the past. And that'll be the key for how we move on in the future, hopefully a near future beyond coronavirus.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely think there's things that need to be, worked on, fixed, changed, but um we have been going for a while, so I definitely think we should, call it a break right there. We will be posting this up to YouTube, so go ahead and if you guys end up seeing this on YouTube, it will be just called The Deep. That's the name of this podcast.
Like and
So
subscribe.
yeah, like, subscribe. If you guys want us to do a part two of quarantine, or if you guys have any topics that you guys are interested on or want us to go over, please leave us a comment, leave us a like. We would greatly appreciate it. We are, just starting out. We're fairly small, but we're really hoping this kind of goes somewhere where we're making something. And if you guys like this conversation, like there's definitely a chance that if we get enough subscribers, we could potentially do like subscriber podcasts, have guests on for having different perspectives outside of our own, because I know just us, you're going to hear it from us a lot, but we will have our friends, maybe some family members on potentially,
Maybe even some
where we can
specialists
get
down the road.
maybe, see what we can do. But if you guys want us to do a part two of the quarantine, go ahead and leave us a like in the comment if you want us to, or any other topic that you might want to hear us talk about, get our perspective about, because you never know, whether it be sports, if you want us to do one specifically on school, we will be doing one about the first time we met, about
Yep.
the Matrix and all of that, the simulation that we potentially lived
Aliens.
in, aliens as well. So we have a few other topics that we have in our bag. But if there's anything else that you guys want us to talk about, please leave us a like, leave us a comment with that. And then if you don't mind, go ahead and hit that red subscribe button, and then hit that bell notification as well. That way you never see when we upload.
And let your friends and family know if you enjoy us. Tell us how we can improve, if there's something you think we can do to make it better. And also, I think you all really kind of honestly got a little bit of a taste for some of the future topics that we'll have full podcasts on, like education and just society. So thank you for listening. We appreciate it. I'm Poe.
And I'm Volt, and
We
this has
hope
been
to
The Deep.
thank you.
There.